The Fuji X100V is probably the most hyped up camera in history. More than 2 years after its release, and it's still sold out everywhere, and it seems Fuji's unable to keep up with the demand. Is this camera actually worth all the hype though? Is it as legendary as everyone's making it out to be? Is it really gonna make you fall in love with photography all over again and want to go out and shoot all the time? Well, in this video, I explain why this camera has become the one that I bring with me everywhere and the reasons why I think it's been such a hit around the world. Hey everyone, if you're new to the channel, my name's Adam. I'm a professional photographer and filmmaker, and throughout my career for the past 7 or 8 years, I've used a bunch of different brands from Canon, Sony, Fuji, and this is the first camera I've owned of many that I just instantly fell in love with. Ever since I picked it up, I haven't really been able to put it down. And for days that I go out and shoot, I'll reach for it like 99% of the time, even over my Canon R5. For me, this is one of the only cameras I've ever owned that almost immediately allowed me to just forget about the camera and the tool itself and just keep living my life and going on adventures and documenting good times. And I think that in a nutshell is what makes this camera so special. Let's start by talking about the lens on this camera, which is a 23mm f2, which on a full frame camera, it's about a 35mm. And we call that kind of our desert island lens in the photography world because it doesn't really do one thing incredibly well, but it does all the things like pretty well. So you can kind of shoot wide and back up and get a nice landscape shot. You can get a little bit closer and get some really nice mediums. And then because of the f2 aperture, if you get up really close to your subject, you can get a lot of depth of field, and it has a pretty close focus distance as well. You can get a lot of blur, make some kind of artsy shots with it too. I think this lens is incredibly versatile, and what's more important, or the application of that, is that when you're shooting, it frees up your conscious brain of thinking about what focal length you're going to use. Because sometimes when I'm out shooting, I'm like, oh, this shot might look good on a 24 with a bit of distortion, but it also might look good on a 50mm. It kind of just takes you out of that thinking brain side and just immediately lets you be creative because you don't have the option. You only have one lens. I believe this makes people who shoot fixed focal lengths and people who are proponents of prime lenses, I think they become better photographers because they're kind of zooming with their feet and they're really just taking a good shot how they see it, and they're not being concerned about, focal length and some of the technical aspects of photography. It's also worth noting that when you get really used to shooting with one lens, you can kind of already pre-visualize a composition or a shot even before looking through your viewfinder or your LCD screen. So because I'm starting to shoot with this so more now and I'm hanging out, I kind of already know if the shot's gonna work or not before I even shoot it. And that's a huge benefit because you really get used to just the nature of that lens, the compression, the distance away from subject, and how it's going to respond. So I think you're going to get more often better shots because you just don't have so many variables within your focal length. Next up, let's talk about the Fujifilm simulations, which are baked into the JPEG files on this camera. And this, for me, honestly, has been a game changer. I didn't realize at first when I started just shooting RAW that this was actually going to be so much fun. And it completely changed the workflow when I use this camera and just on my photography process in general. Typically and professionally, when you're working with RAWs, there's just so many steps involved to get an image from raw image and camera to be able to publish it as a JPEG image, kind of ready to be seen for the world. If you're sharing on Instagram or just sending it to friends, there's so many steps involved with editing. And I typically like to reserve that work for kind of more professional or commercial projects when it warrants that. But when I'm out just documenting my everyday life, shooting for fun, I don't want to have to, offload images to a hard drive and import them into Capture One and edit and export and do AirDrop to my phone. I wanted a way more efficient and seamless workflow. And The JPEG film simulations in this camera have provided that for me like 100% because they just look so good right out of camera. I've been experimenting recently with a Portra 400 film recipe, so you can dial in. It's got a bunch of built-in Fujifilm stocks like Provia, Velvia, Acros, which is a black and white, but you can also make your own. So I've been really loving the Fujifilm Portra 400 recipe. You'll see it here in a couple of shots. And yeah, once I'm done shooting, I'll just hook up my camera to my iPhone, the Fujifilm Connect app, and I'll send all the photos over. And most of the time I don't even really edit them, and sometimes I'll share them with friends like after we hang out, or I'll post them on Instagram. This allows me as a photographer to be way more prolific because I'm not spending as much time here at the desk or at the computer. I'm spending more time out in the world actually shooting and practicing, and that's the part of photography that I love the most. And the third aspect of this camera I want to talk about is its size and portability. And that's the reason why I even gravitated towards this camera initially. I had a few different Sony point and shoot cameras. The image quality was never quite up to par, but I really love the compact size of just being able to take it with me and put it in my pocket kind of anywhere I go. It fits in my running waistband, in the pockets of my ski pants, the bag on my bike, and in my fanny pack. So for getting out and going hiking and a bunch of adventures and the stuff I usually want to document and capture here in my lifestyle, it's really the perfect camera for me. You might have heard before the quote that the best camera you have is the one you have with you. And this is why mobile photography, phone photography has become so popular, is because most people always have their phones with them. So there's no friction of seeing a moment or something happening and just taking out your phone really quickly and snapping a few shots. And this is kind of the equivalent of that for me, but just way higher quality and a way better look to the images. So you end up capturing a lot more like everyday memories and special moments that you probably wouldn't if you were to be lugging around like a DSLR or mirrorless camera with a bunch of different lenses. Most of the time when I'm considering bringing out a camera with me on an adventure or something like that, I decide to just leave it at home because it becomes more of a hassle than I actually want to bring it. But this is one camera that, because of its size and portability, I really have no excuse not to bring it. And it has honestly kind of transformed my photography because I'm getting way more shots that I've always wanted to get that are just more of like a seamless extension of my life and way less curated. Yeah, so those are the reasons why this camera has quickly become one of the favorite cameras I've ever owned and why it's the camera I bring with me everywhere. It's really helped me hone my photography skills. It gets me out shooting more. I'm allowed to capture way more authentic and, everyday moments in my life for the memories. And I think that's a really special part of photography. Thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe for more videos.